Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the second of our series in this fall sermon series, the celebration of discipline. We've been uh, talking about meditation last week, but this week we are moving on to prayer. And so this second practice that we encounter in Richard Foster's book on the celebration of discipline is obviously one of the most common and most written about and most practiced of the spiritual disciplines, even by those who are not explicitly religious, because I think from time to time in our life we always find ourselves in these moments where things are all stripped away, and we all that we have left, we're at this point where whether there's some kind of tragedy going on, or whether there's some kind of life-threatening situation, or whatever it might be, where we find all of the trappings of our life are falling away or in danger, our natural response is to call out to God. Oh God, right? Help me, whatever the circumstances may be. And so prayer exists as our kind of natural reaching out toward God, and is more centered on our needs and our worries and our interests and so forth. And that we find kind of bubbling away within us, and that we want to express, and that we want to exhale out toward the divine, to give over to God. And as I said last week with meditation, there is some overlap here between prayer and meditation, but I think the difference is the kind of stance. With meditation, we are putting ourselves in a more of a quiet, receptive stance, where we're listening and inviting God in. And trying to quiet our own thoughts down and center and still our inner space, so that God can kind of make room for God in some way. But for prayer, it's more of the expressiveness or the expression of things. And that can happen in all sorts of ways, whether it's with our words or writing or in art, or there's a range of different prayer practices that people do. But what we're going to talk about today is something that's just a couple of items that are, I think, common to any kind of prayer, any form of prayer that I've noticed. And, we could talk all day about prayer, of course, but we're going to just cut her down to a couple of points. So there are a lot of ways to do prayer, like I said, but one of the things that I think are common to them all is what kind of inner state we are practicing the form of prayer in. And what I'm talking about is that if there's a certain state of consciousness in which prayer becomes most effective, that we should try to cultivate when we pray, and that has to do with humility. This state of consciousness has to do with a grounded sort of honesty about yourself and what you are expressing to God, right? Because in this conversation, in this communication, we're not talking to a good friend or a family member or a therapist, right? We're talking to the creator of all things. We're talking to the ground of all being, the fundamental source of all life and love, that knows us better than we know ourselves, which is unlike any kind of other interaction, any kind of other expression. In most cases, our relationships are dictated by some sort of facade. You're playing a role. Maybe you're a parent, or maybe you're a child, or maybe you're a friend, or maybe you're, in some kind of, employee relationship, or there's a role that you're engaging in. But with God, we have to kind of leave that nonsense at the door. We're not a father or mother. You're not a skilled worker or a friend or anything else. There are no roles that you bring before God, no facade, not even the facade of a good child of God. Because when we pray, it's kind of weird, but we stand sort of naked before God, and all things are revealed. All the things we'd like to keep hidden are revealed. We can't hide anything from God. And so it's different than any sort of other form of communication or engagement with others. So if you're angry about something, be angry. If you are happy about something, be happy. If you're upset or resentful or joyful or worried or frightened or frustrated or whatever it is. Be those things before God. You're not going to fool God, so don't try, right? Be honest and put away all the nonsense. Put away all the roles that we kind of play for other human beings. That's a big stance that we want to kind of try to cultivate when we're praying. So that's one. So that's honesty. That's one. Second thing, and this is something that I think plagues us in a number of different practices for the spiritual disciplines, but and our society, I suppose, in general, is we struggle with banality. And what is banality? To be banal is to make something sort of commonplace and trivial. And I guess I don't know, when I think about Soviet era apartment buildings, these sort of blocky concrete, ugly, practical, unspecial, unsacred, right? Banal, bland, pure utility, no beauty, right? So I was thinking about this, and I was like, have you ever dressed up for no reason and gone out into the world, right? And people you meet whoa, what are you dressed up for, right? It's almost an accusation. What are you doing? Why are you dressed up? You have to have a reason to look like that, right? Because nobody would choose to look nice for no reason, right? Right? If you've ever looked at old videos on the internet, on YouTube, they're generating or remastering old, some of the earliest video footage of things like 1905 streets of New York. And people weren't really videotaping anything special. They were just videotaping people walking down the street, just a normal average Tuesday in New York City in 1902. And it's really amazing because the first thing you notice, apart from how thin everybody is how well the average person is dressed. So this is a good example, I think, of banality. We've kind of become banal in our dress, right? And so the point is, I guess, in the same sort of way that we have made things sort of regular and unspecial, we should try to fight that or resist that when it comes to our time of prayer. Don't make prayer a banal experience, right? And that's to say, just like we don't have to run around in 3-piece suits everywhere either. But when we dress up, when we kind of or at least wear nicer clothes, what we're trying to do is say to one another that I have respect for myself and I have respect for you, and it's not to show off necessarily, but it's just there's a medium ground in there that's I'm not a slob and I'm not I'm not just trying to show off. There's a medium thing here where we're making something special and important. And so, and the same thing with prayer, we don't have to build a shrine in your house for prayer, of course. We don't want to fall into that error, and think that because we have, you can make a shrine, I suppose, but the point is we're not using those things as props to show how wonderful we are, with our prayer life. But at the same time, we do have to make it, I think it's important for us to make it something special. It's something intentional, right? So setting some special time aside for prayer to make it holy. That's what it means, to make it special, to make it set apart, and find a place that you won't be disrupted, and maybe even do something like light a candle or something like that kind of activates and signals that you are starting something important, something sacred. This is a holy act. And if we get into the mode of treating prayer as such, it helps us to pray. It kind of moves us into that space. So, now we are in our prayer mode. It signals that and triggers that for us. We're in our prayer mode because we're physical beings, and our physical circumstances matter, even when we are engaging in spiritual practices. So the same thing goes with kneeling or speaking out loud a prayer. You don't normally kneel in day-to-day life. Not only is it an indication or a signal of that first thing we talked about, that kind of honesty or humility, but it's also a signal that I'm doing something different here, right? And you don't have to kneel to pray, but that's just one way into making that prayer time different or special or sacred or holy or set apart. And the same thing with like praying out loud when you're alone. That feels a little weird when you're speaking out loud to God. But that's kind of the point. The point is that we're activating something and we're making this a special circumstance. We're cutting through the banal and making this a moment worthy of voicing to God. And it gives the prayer time a kind of intentionality that I feel like it can benefit any kind of prayer, no matter what sort of prayer you're engaging in. Okay, so honesty and intentionality are important. Here's the third thing. What is the expectation that we take into our prayer time? We have the right, stance in our consciousness. We're humble and humble. We've set up the right circumstances, physically or spatially around us. What are we hoping for? What's our expectation that we're bringing into this? And because what we want to do is avoid a practice of prayer that is what you might call the vending machine model of prayer. The vending machine model of prayer is, I want something, I have my coin, I plug it in, push the button, and then something pops out the bottom. And as we all know, God doesn't work that way. And so if we have the vending machine model of prayer in our minds, and then we go and we pray and we try it and it doesn't work, we say, oh, well, phooey to all this. This doesn't work. So you see, our expectation about this practice is wrong. We're going into it with the wrong kind of mindset. This would be the same mistake as if we're, in meditation we talked about last week. If we're meditating for the experience of meditation, if we're meditating in order to have, esoteric journeys into the spiritual realms, and you're not meditating right, because we don't meditate for the sake of meditation. We don't pray. The purpose of prayer is not to treat God like a cosmic vending machine for all of our desires, no matter how noble or reasonable or heartfelt those desires may be. So the way that that I like to think about prayer is more of a practice is more of like breathing. It has more of a biological function, but for your soul. So our life of prayer is kind of like the soul breathing, I guess. We exhale up to God and then breathe in the benedictions that descend from above. So it's a rhythm and a cycle, breathing out and breathing in and exhaling all of our stuff and inhaling the consolations that descend from above. And so to stop praying is a kind of spiritual asphyxiation. And you can see this, right? You can see that the pattern that oftentimes people will fall into is one where we just hold our breath. Right, and we hold our breath and we say to ourselves, I can do this. I can live my life without God. I can make my own destiny and drive my own, place into the world. And I don't need the divine in my life. And then eventually we go blue in the face because our life is a mess and our internal space is a mess. And then we exhale explosively and then suck air in and feel restored because we go through these crises and cathartic moments. And then we breathe in the divine because we finally break down and give up over to God what is God's. And instead of just breathing in regularly from there on, we hold our breath again. So we're like, we go through this cycle of holding our breath and then exhaling explosively. And it's just kind of ridiculous. Meanwhile, our souls are on this sort of roller coaster of ups and downs and extremes. And it's just so much easier to just find a regular pattern of breathing. A daily practice of setting aside some time and just making this happen, making this exhale and inhale moment happen in our life. So what do I mean though when I say consolations and benedictions that descend? Because what's the inhaling part of this? And what I mean by that is when we're being honest with God and giving over to God all the things that are on our hearts and minds, although we may not get what we want, we will get what we need. If we ask, it will come. And sometimes, and here's the trick though, sometimes we don't want what we need. And so things get right confusing. And why? So here's why. The reality is we don't have the foggiest clue what's going on in internally or externally. I know we think we do and we want to think that we do, but we don't, right? And it doesn't take much thought to really recognize this. I mean, when I look at other people, even people I know well, I'm not really looking at them fully, right? Because they are, even people I know well, they have this long history that stretches out before them, and they have this long future potentially that stretches out in front of them. But the little slice that I'm seeing on this day in this moment isn't really a full reflection of this whole thing that is them. Do you see how I'm trying to define this? Like, you are more than just what sits at a table in a coffee shop on a given day. You are this huge range of things that has happened to you since the beginning, all the way to what will happen that none of us know anyway, God knows, what will be. And you are all of these things kind of simultaneously. And all we're seeing is this little speck of you, or like looking through the peephole of a door or something. And we just get to see this little bit of a notion of who this person is. And then it goes in a different direction too, because even if you had a full videotape of somebody's life, like 80 years of somebody's whole life, that would take you 80 years to watch, and you could see everything that ever happened to them, every moment of their life, you still wouldn't know them. Not in a deep way, right? Because they had all of this internal stuff, that their hopes and their dreams and their loves and their interests and all of the stuff that bubbles away inside of them that isn't expressed on the outside. And they have all of these deep, dark things too, secrets and desires and wishes and all of the stuff, and all of these things, from all the way up to all the way down, from all the way to the beginning to all the way to the end. All of this is not clearly represented in this little point that you are right now. You are enormously more than what you look at in the mirror. And I think that's kind of obvious when we think about it. But what that also says is that to even myself, who I know the most of, like in terms of my memory's kind of faulty of what I remember of myself. There are times where you see videos of yourself where you just don't even recognize yourself anymore, right? Like, you're not the same person, and you've kind of forgotten who you are. So even our memories of ourselves are faulted, and I'm not clear about what I really want, and I'm not clear about what I really struggle with, and I'm certainly not clear about what's going to happen to me. And so how could I possibly, with the super limited knowledge that I have of myself right now, who I know the best, how could I possibly stand before God and tell God what I need? Do you see where I'm trying to get here? That's not a reasonable it doesn't seem reasonable to me. It's like a 2-year-old coming up to you, and maybe you've had this experience where a 2-year-old comes up and sort of authoritatively tells you, like a parent or something, I need ice cream. I need it. I need ice cream. And the parent's like, no, you don't. You might get ice cream from time to time. Maybe we'll go get some ice cream now, but you don't need it. And maybe now is not the right time to get ice cream. And so when we express our desires to God and tell God, this is the way the world should be, and this is the way that I should be, and this is what I should have, and this is what I should deserve, and the world shouldn't be this way, and I shouldn't be that way, and this is not what I deserve, and so on and so forth. No, right? That's not how we pray, because it's not connecting the expectations properly. That's the vending machine version. We don't know. It's full of hubris. We couldn't possibly know what we really need. And so prayer should be more reflective of the state we're in. I'm hot. I'm cold. I'm excited, right? These are prayers. I'm hungry. I'm grateful. I'm angry. I'm worried. I'm tired. I'm sad. I'm broken. I'm sorry. Those are prayers. I'll see you next week. God bless.